as we end December and end 2023 and we start to look to 2024, it's important that we all realize how important January is going to be for Donald Trump and for our democracy. And it is absolutely when the courts will start ramping up and things will start happening very, very quickly. I mean, things are still happening even though it's the holidays, and Jack Smith is still filing things even though his case, his January 6th case, is on pause. But it is absolutely, there are things that are happening, but as soon as the courts come back from their holiday, you will see January is going to be an intense month as everything gears up, because all of these cases that Trump is facing are all crashing into the Supreme Court around the same time. And January is going to be Trump's month from hell. He is going to be facing so many different legal issues that are going to really spell out who he is and how he will be held accountable. So let's start first with the E. Jean Carroll case. If you recall, there was already an E. Jean Carroll case. So there were two. There was E. Jean Carroll 1 and E. Jean Carroll 2. Number 2 went before number 1. I'm not sure why my video just did that. Number 2 went before number 1, and number 2 found him to be liable. They found for the plaintiffs, they said he was essentially guilty of sexual abuse civilly, not rape, because rape in New York requires a penis to the vagina, and she wasn't 100% sure if it was his penis or if it was his finger. And because she wasn't 100% sure which body part was inserted inside of her, they said we can't 100% say rape. It's just a quirk of New York. Most other states, if you were to violently, forcibly, sexually assault someone by inserting a body part into a woman's vagina, regardless of what it is, it would still be considered rape. And frankly, she was raped, but because of that one quirk, they said, yes, he was guilty of sexually abusing her and defaming her. And so the next case that's going is the E. Jean Carroll 1 case, right? And he is likely to get hit with a massive judgment in that case, because the second case, or the first case, which was the second case that he was already, there was already a judgment there. The case, by the way, where he couldn't be bothered to show up to court, but then he went out and continuously defamed E. Jean Carroll, especially after the verdict. And of course, thankfully, they added those extra charges to this other case that continued to defame her. He got hit with $5 million judgment there. I think the fact that he continued to defame her after that, which was added to this case, which is going to this case is essentially about damages. I think that is going to be, he's going to be hit with a massive verdict. I also think the fact that the Rudy Giuliani defamation case, where Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss were awarded whatever, $150 million, upwards of $150 million, I think, that's juries and jurors will have seen that. And I think you're going to see a massive judgment against Donald Trump in this E. Jean Carroll case now that it's going in January. Because the Second Circuit, which is the appellate court above the district court in federal court in New York, it's the middle level before you'd get to the Supreme Court. They said, sorry, we're not pausing that, we're not staying it. So Trump is going to have to go to trial in that case in January. At the same time, in January, don't forget, in early January, summations in the New York Attorney General civil fraud case is happening. So the summations, as well as the judgment. Judge Arthur Engoron is going to rule and give his verdict and his judgment. I believe it'll be written, where he's already found, so there was, I think, 7 charges against Trump, and one of them was the executive law section 6312, which requires the Attorney General's office to prove that there was persistent fraud, which the judge already found in summary judgment that he engaged Trump and his adult children and others in his business dealings had engaged in persistent fraud. And so he's already been found liable there. He's already been adjudicated with that charge. But there's 6 other charges that involve also persistent fraud, but it's like persistent fraud plus, right? They had to also prove that that the fraud was material, that the fraud was intentional, and that there are some elements of criminal activity like insurance fraud and other fraud that they have to also prove to be found liable for those charges. And I suspect that Judge Engoron is going to find Trump liable for most, but not all of those charges for 2 reasons. I think number one, the fact that Trump brought in experts to say that from Deutsche Bank and others saying, oh, he was a whale, he was somebody we wanted as a client, so we weren't going to, we didn't rely on these things, these numbers, we did our own due diligence, et cetera. I think that could go to the materiality element potentially for the judge. I also think the judge has a strategic reason for potentially not ruling completely on Trump for all of them, is because Trump's one argument that he will make on appeal, the record that he's been trying to make all along and has, is that this judge isn't listening, that he went into this trial with his mind made up, that this judge is biased against him, that his law secretary is biased, and that he said these lies about her, that she's a Democratic operative, and causing all kinds of horrific, hate-filled death threats to the court, and I think Judge Engoron will want the appellate court and the record to show that he wasn't necessarily, that he was listening, I should say. And he was listening to the evidence and parsing it out. And if he rules for Trump on most, but not all, like let's say 1 or 2 of them, it doesn't matter. He can still hit him massively with damages, which I predict he will. I think he's going to be, I know that the Attorney General has asked for, among other things, a disgorgement of more than $250 million. I think it's going to be more. I think it's going to be closer to $1 billion, if not more than $1 billion. I think he's also going to rule that he can't have businesses in New York. And he's going to smack him down considerably, especially because of the fact that he doesn't listen. He's already found him to lie. Don't forget. He issued a gag order, and then when Trump went out and I think it was during a lunch break, or it was after court, went out and gave a speech, he then got on the stand and lied about who he was talking about. And the judge said that he was lying and said he did not find him credible. So the judge has already shown that Trump is a liar and not credible. And he will absolutely, I think, punish him for that in any kind of sentence. So I think you're going to see a huge, huge hit and judgment against him in that case as well in January. And then I also think when you look at the D.C. Circuit in the presidential immunity Jack Smith case. So now we're pivoting to criminal. I'm just talking about January, what's going on in January. And if you pivot to the criminal case, the Jack Smith's DC, Washington, D.C. Jan 6 case that's on pause right now because it's winding its way through the appellate courts, oral arguments are in January. I think it's January 9th. I can almost guarantee that the D.C. Circuit is going to rule very quickly, and like within days, and they're going to rule against Trump and say, of course, you're not immune from criminal prosecution. Trump keeps saying, oh, but it was for official acts. It doesn't matter if it was for official acts or not official acts. That only applies in the civil context of presidential immunity, and whether you can sue someone civilly, not criminally. You can't just say, oh, okay, I'm president, and therefore you can't, what if there's a bribe with a foreign government and say, oh, but I was, doing my job. I was acting as president, talking to a foreign government, but he was, took a bribe. So of course you can be prosecuted for that. So it's kind of ridiculous. He's never going to win that case. And the question is, though, will the Supreme Court do that quickly enough for the case to go in March, or will they take their time? Because the Supreme Court, I think, knows they have to rule for or against Trump in the presidential immunity context. There's just no way that Trump or any other president, right? You don't want to rule for all time that all presidents are immune and can't ever be prosecuted. That's ridiculous, right? It should apply to everybody, not just to Trump, and so they can't rule that. They can't substantively rule for him. So how could they essentially help him if they wanted to without ruling for him? Would be to delay things, right? Just delay it. Just say, we're not going to expedite this. We're going to take our time. There's so many issues before us that we have to consider. We're going to consider this. Also, there's the two of the charges that he's charged with criminally are being appealed also in another case, not even this case, in another case about whether it can apply to the Jan 6ers or not. And so we have to consider that, and we have so much to consider. So, we're not going to get to it before the election. And if Trump wins the election, then the case is over because he'll dismiss it, right? He'll dismiss it and he'll potentially self-pardon if you're even allowed to do that. But he doesn't care. He does whatever he wants to do anyway. But he'll dismiss the cases. He'll be in charge of the Department of Justice. He'll appoint an attorney general and he'll dismiss the case. So delay is the name of the game in that case because he can't win substantively either in the Supreme Court or he can't win at trial. He just can't. He's guilty. So we'll see what the Supreme Court does. But I can tell you right now, the D.C. Circuit is not going to rule in his favor and is not going to hold this up. So they will make this move quickly and he will lose that too. So January is going to be a huge month for Trump, not in a good way. So stay tuned. We'll be here to bring you all the news. I'm Karen Friedman Agnifilo with Legal AF. Join me every Wednesday and Saturday with my co-hosts Michael Popak and Ben Meiselas.
Thanks so much for watching. We're only a few subscribers short of 2 million subs. Please subscribe right now to the MeidasTouch YouTube channel for free and help us grow this unapologetically pro-democracy network.